Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. PropertyGuru flew me in just to talk to you guys about government policies and especially the recent budget on Malaysian property sector. Now, if I just concentrate on the budget, you won't have a big picture of it. So I'm going to go a little bit about past budgets and where the direction of the government will be going, and whether that direction will actually impact you as an investor. So it is more fruitful if I go into this process. So I will talk a bit about past budgets together with some other policies that affect real estate and what the government has been doing, particularly on cooling measures that you would be concerned about, and what the measures hope to achieve, and did they achieve it? And then I would talk about what the present government's concern is. Is it really prices that's running away, like in Singapore when they kept introducing a lot of policies to bring down those prices? Or is it affordability that they're concerned about? Or is it containing supply? And then I will go into the recent budget, what its impact is on the property, and what I think the upcoming budget will be doing, and whether there would be any more cooling measures that would affect you as an investor. All right? Let's go. Now, there was quite a series of cooling measures, not as much as what the Singapore government did, but going back 2007, the government totally removed the real property gains tax, which was really excellent for an investor. You know, you can just buy and sell and not have to pay any real property gains tax in 2007. Now, why did the government do that? The government did it because at that time private investment was quite low, and they had to revive the country's, especially investments by the private sector. Then they noticed that property prices, particularly in 2009, started to pick up substantially. So in 2010, they started to introduce real property gains tax, very little. Initially, it was only 5% for the first to fifth year in 2010. In 2011, they increased it to 10% in the first 2 years, and 5% thereafter. In 2013, they increased it to 15% for the first 2 years. By 2014, it went back to 30% in the first 3 years, which was what was experienced in prior to this period of time. That means prior to this, they actually had 30% RPGT. So it went back to the original state of affairs. Now, but actually RPGT, I felt, didn't particularly impact the market that badly, because even with RPGT of 30%, you still make money, right? If you buy 1 million, you sell 1.3 million, you only give the money 30% to the government, the remaining 70% you pocket, all right? So that's still good. I think what actually did kill the market, in a sense, was when DIBS was abolished. That's called Developers Interest Bearing Scheming. Those who know it, it's just, you know, you're not allowed, the developers are not allowed to, you know, give you no payment on your interest until the day that it's completely built. And also the fact that there was increase in floor price for foreigners to buy from 500,000 to 1 million. So that did bring down the market, and you can see in terms of residential transaction volume, it started to come down. Also in 2014, the economy slowed down, and so in a series of 2 events, one by the government and the other also by the economy, that brought down the residential transaction volume. In 2015, there was 6% GST. It's not imposed on residential property. It's only for commercial property. Okay, so that was the series of events that led to lower transaction volume for residential. But if we actually look at the house price index, it's not that bad, really. If you compare, say, 2011 to 2018, house prices actually rose by 68% with a compounded annual growth rate of just an annual growth rate of or close to 9% per annum, which is really, really quite good. So that is if you got it in 2011, all right? Just to compare Singapore and Malaysian house price index. So in Malaysia's case, it certainly would seem that it had performed better overall. If you came in, say, in 2009, at the same point, Malaysia has continued to increase while Singapore actually declined during a certain period of time. Or actually 3 years, that's seen on this chart, but it's actually more than that. Just to give you a closer look, if you look at quarter-on-quarter changes, there was only one quarter where you actually see a negative drop. Whereas in Singapore, there was at least 15 rounds of contraction quarter-on-quarter. All right? That was done recently because of the Singapore government's cooling measures. Also during the crisis in 2008, there was 4 quarters of negative growth for Singapore, implying that Singapore's market tends to be a little bit more volatile compared to Malaysia. Sorry. All right. Also, in 2013 or 14, I think Bank Negara was very concerned about the high household debts and all that. So Bank Negara came in and said, told the banks, you have to impose this responsible lending guidelines. And there was also decrease in loan applications and approvals, particularly, as you can see in this chart, in this period of time, 2013. So that, again, led to the downward movement of residential property transactions. Now, new budget measures, okay? This is a summary of what I'm going to show you later in the budget. We notice in the new budget that was announced October last year, there was announcement of more affordable housing by Prima. When they say more affordable housing, it's actually housing prices of 400,000 Malaysian ringgit and below. So it doesn't, it doesn't affect you guys. There was also tax exemption of up to 50% for rental income of less than 2,000, meaning that landlords, they can actually get this tax exemption, and hopefully they can pass it to the people who rent it from them and lower the rent prices. And lower tax rates for lower income bracket. So basically, all these are targeted to help the poorer section of the population who needs shelter, housing, a roof over their head. There was also step-up financing, allowing Prima home buyers to finance their loan interest installments for the first 5 years using their EPF and start paying the principal for the 6th year onwards. Again, to help the poorer section of the population. Now, these are the exact things that came out of Budget 18. Basically, it was an expansionary budget, meaning more was spent, and this was supposed to help growth and increase employment. Personal tax rate was reduced by 2% for those earning between 20,000 to 70,000. This actually would help the disposable income of the lower income population. There was also talk about more affordable housing, all right? And these were the numbers, about 57,900 would be built for the coming years. And tax exemption that I mentioned earlier, tax up to 50% for rental income of less than 2,000, and the step-up financing that I mentioned. So all these, like I said, are targeted at affordable housing and for the poorer section of the population. There was also infrastructure spending, Penang Airport, Langkawi Airport to be upgraded, and a new airport in Tioman, upgrade of international airports in Penang, Langkawi, Kota Baru, Sandakan, and Muka, and construction of MRT to be expedited and completed ahead of time. Again, this would further complement the Klang Valley infrastructure and, of course, real estate. There was also help given to women to be included in directors. Women returning to work would actually enjoy tax exemption. And this was actually supposed to help increase more women employment. There was also removal of this. You see, earlier on, the year before, there was supposed to be an increase of stamp duty from 3% to 4%, which was supposed to be effective this year. But they decided to remove it altogether. Now, why? Okay. What does it mean for the investor? Will the increase in supply of affordable housing, what would it mean to you? Would it affect your investment? No, it won't. More affordable housing not likely to compete with the high-end housing. The developers are encouraged in other ways to develop more affordable housing. So it actually may reduce the supply of higher-end housing. So it can be seen from a positive perspective as it actually reduces the supply of high-end, and those who have bought, then you would have, not more and more coming in, but a reduced number coming in over the next 5 to 10 years. And you probably see that new developments in suburban areas are likely to feature more affordable housing, while premier locations near the city center, they are likely to be delayed because firstly, the developers still need to build high-end near the city because the cost of land is very expensive near the city center. But they can't do it now because there's all this restrictions and the ban of building properties above 1 million. So the other question, is it true that there is no demand for high-end properties? Let's take a look at the statistics and see. Now, I took this between 2012 and 2016, and I noticed that the biggest growth was actually in 500,000 to 1 million. Okay, mind you, this was during a period when property prices weren't doing well. The economy was slowing down. Okay, so of course these numbers looks very subdued. Actually, honestly, there is not that much demand for property prices below 250,000. Okay, so there is demand for residential property prices in that category, 500,000 to 1 million. Another look of residential property transactions by subsector. Now, if you looked at the trend, you find that actually there is a movement towards higher end properties. if you just take these three alone, would constitute 80% of total properties transacted in Malaysia in 2016 itself. So there is definitely a demand for high-end properties. So not entirely true that there is no demand, yeah? So I know you've been reading a lot of media and you think that actually there's no demand, which is quite untrue, yeah. And just to confirm what I say, this is a basket of residential properties that JLL tracks. We only provide it to our subscribers, but I just share with you that the properties that we track in Bangsa, Mid Valley, Damansara, KL Central, Ampang, and KLCC, which are prime properties that we monitor, the percentage sold has been consistently very high, actually, over 90%, even during cyclical downturns experienced over the past 4 years. Again, this reconfirms what I'm saying, that there is demand for high-end properties, and this is just what I said, the Ampang, KLCC, all these are the places we cover. We cover prime properties here, and notice that although the unsold rate has risen, it is still safely below 5%. So that's really very good, meaning that the developers are able to sell those properties for the high end. Okay, and in the upcoming budget, will there be any more cooling measures? Okay, we think because it's election around the corner, right? And this year, when the next budget comes out, those who are in power would have to stay popular at least. So they are unlikely to impose anything to tax on the demand side, like, for example, raise more stamp duties and GST, because it's just post-election, all right? I think it's unnecessary for the government to come up with any more cooling measures, because there is already in the environment a potential rise in interest rates. Not much, maybe another 0.25%. They raised it, Bank Negara raised 0.25% last year. At most, I think this year another 0.25%. Is there any need to control buyer speculation? I think the removal of DIBS and lower loan approvals have already contained this, and there was already a downward movement in property prices for a few years. But things have started to pick up, but it's not picked up like runaway kind of prices. In fact, the government is looking at controlling the supply. So the emphasis has shifted altogether. So as I said, highly unlikely to have any more cooling measures. There is no evidence to support inflationary house prices, as both transacted volume and value are down 2014 and 2015. Speculation has been kept in check. People in Malaysia are buying. Those who are buying, they are genuine buyers or they are upgraders. Okay, they are not speculators. And in fact, the government removed the additional 1% stamp duty for properties priced over 1 million. Initially, they wanted to impose because they were afraid prices were moving up. But they have completely removed that altogether. So the concern now is switched to mismatch and lack of supply for affordable housing, especially those below 400,000. Now, why was that so much concern about this 400,000? It's partly political, because it's election time coming, and you know that a good big portion of the population are the younger millennials, and they need housing, especially if they've graduated and started working, and they do need housing, and they would be voting, all right? So there's a lot of concern on providing that kind of affordable housing for them. And recently, the government announced a freeze on the development of future high-rise condominiums, price above 1 million. Like I said, it would be a positive factor for you, all right? so there's not too many to compete with you. And the supply itself, by natural, it should reduce prices via demand and supply forces, all right? This is just to show you the interest rates. Actually, it's hardly moved very much, and the lowest it went to was in 2010. The recent raise in interest rates is still slightly below what was experienced in 2008. So I don't think it's going to be earth-shaking for the property sector. You'll be fine. I think it's another 40%. You'll be able to tolerate it. And policy rates in Malaysia are actually one of the lowest. Malaysia is the red line here. One of the lowest policy rates, for interest rates. And after taking into account inflation, it's actually almost negative. All right, so it makes sense for people to buy houses, because if your interest rate in the bank is giving you negative returns, why put it there, right? So people should actually invest in something better. And actually, the last few years was actually a very good time to enter the Malaysian property market. From the time in 2012, because our exchange rate weakened, Malaysia actually was the most attractive over the past 3 years, and then I've been shouting since 2014 that opportunity is there, and I wrote this article, Opportunity Knocks Twice, because it came down twice. But since then, the ringgit has strengthened, okay, and as you can see, it strengthened substantially by 8%, although it's still significantly lower than 2006, And a lot of foreigners have taken note of this, and as you can see, there was a lot of inflow into Malaysia, foreign capital in 2017, all right? And actually, I think other speakers will be covering this, but I just want to say that notice the value of transactions has just started to pick up in residential property in first half of this year. Okay. All right. I think I will end it here then.